Good morning, everyone. Glad you could join us. Start off with a quick injury update. Both Josh Ezeudu and Desmond Evans worked back into practice last week. They'll continue to practice this week, and obviously we'll evaluate them for their readiness for Saturday. Otherwise, we're in good shape, and we'll turn it over to Coach Brown.
Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody had a great weekend watching college football. It's so much fun to see everybody back on the field and playing, and such a credit to everybody who's been involved in making this happen. And these coaches and players across the country have been incredible to play without coaches, to play without some of their players on their teams. Even when some are postponed to get ready to go back the next week. So it's been really pleasing to see. As I sat and watched games this weekend, I think the two things popped up to me. It seems like there's been more comebacks, so maybe guys aren't in as great a shape as if we had the spring and the summer workouts like normal. So there's a lot of comebacks, so you got to play and you got to finish. And the other thing is kicking game. Special teams have been all over the place. It's been crazy. And I think, again, it's probably because we didn't have as much time to work on some of those issues as you normally would have. For us, this is the longest break that we've taken in Carolina football for 68 years. In 1952, there was a polio outbreak, and we had a 3-week layoff at that time. So, yes, I was 1 year old, but I wasn't available to play at that time. So I'm not going back that far, but Jeremy made me aware of that this morning. We've actually had 2 good weeks of practice, which has been interesting. I didn't know how they would respond last week after not playing Charlotte and then us not being able to secure a game for the weekend. But we had 3 good days of practice last week, so we've had a lot of work on Boston College moving forward. The positives are the young guys that missed spring practice or didn't get as much work this summer have had an extra week to work, or really 2 weeks to work. So hopefully they'll be more ready to play than they would have 2 weeks ago. Also, guys that were injured, as Jeremy mentioned a couple of names before we started, will be healthy for this game, and they probably couldn't have played in an earlier game. I thought this morning about does it still hold true that you improve the most between your first and second game if there's 2 weeks between them, and 3 weeks really between them? And I think probably not. We're starting over. We've got to completely start over. I think the reason you improve so much between game 1 and game 2 is you go right back to work, correct all your mistakes, and you're back into full practice mode. So where I listened to some of our players and I've talked to them, and they said they think it's been really good because we're fresh. We've been able to continue to get in condition and still worked on Boston College, but we still haven't had our second game. So that'll be interesting to see this weekend as we move forward. But I'm not worried about them being excited about playing. They'll be ready to play, and that'll be fun for them as we start going through it. The other thing, it helped us with our secondary loss of Miles Woolfolk, the fact that Trey Morrison and Jaquarius Conley had an extra week to work before we played. So that gave us also some more work for them. When we start looking at a couple of other footnotes here before I start on Boston College, we have scheduled Western Carolina for Friday, December the 11th. It'll be Friday night after the Miami game, and there is a clause in there that says that we will play that game unless there is reason to have moved an ACC game. So if there's a postponement of one of our games and we have to move an ACC game to that weekend, then we would not play Western Carolina. But other than that, we are scheduled. The ACC did want us to fill that spot, I think, for TV. So that's something that they wanted us to do. I'm also excited for our players' families that they will have tickets, their normal ticket allotment for our Virginia Tech game in 2 weeks. So that'll be fun to get the families back where they can see their sons play. And that's very, very important to us. And they're talking about 7%, unless that changes between now and Virginia Tech. It sounds like we'd have about 3,500 fans in the stands, which will seem like a whole lot after the Syracuse game. And at Boston College, the way I understand it, no families get tickets, and there will be no fans in the stands at that time. Jeff Hafley is 2-0 at Boston College. He was mentored by Greg Schiano, and Greg's one of the better coaches in the country, but definitely defensive coaches. He did a tremendous job at Ohio State. He actually played for Jay Bateman at Siena. Jay was a 26-year-old head coach, and he and Jeff are very close, and they've been good friends for a long time. And Steve I've met Jeff on Zoom because of our meetings this spring. I haven't met him in person, so I'm looking forward to the challenge this weekend. He has them playing hard. They've really got after Duke, and last week didn't play as well against Texas State, but for a new coach with a new staff to have the confidence to hang in there and be 14 down and the team believe in them and come back and win the game, that's probably the worst thing that could have happened to us, because it gives them a lot of confidence coming into this weekend. Steve Adazio had a team of big, strong, tough offensive linemen and running the football, and that was his culture, a defense that played really, really hard. And Jeff's doing the same stuff. 4 of their 5 offensive linemen are back. All 4 of those guys got some awards in the ACC last year. They've got arguably the best tight end in the country in Hunter Long at 16 catches in 2 weeks, 174 yards, 2 touchdowns. So he is an impact player for sure. They've got a big quarterback that transferred in from Notre Dame that was very highly recruited in Jurkovec. He's 6'5", 230. He's off to a really good start, and he didn't even get there till August. So every week that he plays, he's going to get better and learn more about their offense. So 2 really good backs in Bailey and Levy. Bailey's the 40-pound pounder, and they would like to stay on the field and keep the ball against us because they're a lot bigger than we are up front. And you've got Levy, who's a special teams captain that can play really, really well in space. And then 2 wide receivers, Flowers, who can fly, and Gill, who's a transfer from Ohio State. So you know he's very talented as well. So offensively, those guys are good. You start looking at what they do defensively. Jeff was raised on the defensive side of the ball, so they forced 6 turnovers in 2 games. We've only forced 1 in 1 game, so that's a concern for us. They've got 2 really good pass rushers outside with Valdez, 97, and 11. Shylaw, they're both really quick guys inside. Uwanka and Beckett are 2 really good transfers in the defensive line. They're physical. They're not as tall as our offensive linemen, so we're going to have to play with really, really good leverage. Probably their guy that they believe in is Isaiah McDuffie, number 55, the middle linebacker. He's all over the field, and he seems to be their spiritual leader, and then they're coached really, really well in the secondary. So it'll be a fun challenge for us. I'm excited about playing and getting back on the field and just seeing our guys. They've worked so hard. They deserve to play. How will we play? How does anybody know? But it's a national TV game. My friend Joe Tessitore's, he's calling the game along with Greg McElroy. And so it's going to be a great moment for us and Boston College to showcase who we are nationally. Questions?
Okay. Again, use the raise hand function, and please identify yourself and the affiliation you are representing. We will begin today with Andrew Jones. So Andrew, go ahead.
Hey, Coach, what would be a bigger concern? How amped up guys are for an opener, or something like this where you go 3 weeks without playing, you've already gotten a taste of being on the field, and maybe the anxieties might be a little bit more of an issue?
Andrew, I feel like that we are definitely starting the season over. Seems like Syracuse was forever ago. And we played well against Syracuse, except in the second quarter offensively and on special teams. The rest of the game we played well. but we saw things we needed to fix, and we've addressed those things, and now it's time to just do it again. And hopefully, we've got 7 straight weeks here, and you've got to anticipate that you play all 7 of those games. And hopefully each week that players will understand more how to handle COVID, and coaches will understand it. And like we said, we're seeing players missing games, and guys are going on, next man up, and we're seeing coaches miss games and next man up. So also this will be our first time to travel. So we haven't done that. I thought we were one of the fortunate teams to have 2 home games to open the season so we could get comfortable with all the guidelines. And then we lost our second game, but now we've got to get on a plane, and that'll be different. The whole thing will be different. But we have stayed in the hotel. We have some of that routine in place. So I'm just excited to see how we are. I think we've got a chance to be good. This will be a great test for us. Virginia Tech looked really good. So we've got them next weekend. We're about to jump back into it now. We can't. We've been talked about and bragged on enough. It's time for us to prove something.
Sam said last week that he didn't think timing would be an issue because in practice, he gets to actually throw to all the receivers and throw to them a lot. In your experiences, is timing affected by a layoff like this, or is what Sam said 100%? You go in your repetition and should carry into the games?
Yeah, Andrew, I'm going with Sam. We've thrown the ball well in practice. The guys have had great timing. Our secondary is really good, so they've had great battles against each other in practice, and that competition's made us better on both sides of the ball. I think what gets off is special teams. I think that's what we're seeing. You people just can't show the full live picture and keep your team healthy with special teams, and that's what's suffering in ball games so far. You also could see, I'm concerned about ball protection simply because you don't tackle as much full speed. So we haven't done that. You would have gotten that in a game with Charlotte. And you're also concerned some that we didn't strip the ball very well last year, and we didn't strip the ball well against Syracuse. So we need to do a better job of forcing turnovers on defense. So those are things I think that you miss by not playing in live action in a game.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, Aaron Beard, you're up.
Hey, Mac, Aaron Beard with the AP. I'm glad you mentioned conditioning because I was going to ask about that today. What kind of, maybe did you do extra emphasis on conditioning as one of the things you had time to do during this gap?
Aaron, we really didn't. We continued to do what we've been doing. I've been so impressed with the 3 phases of our program outside of the coaches, and that's Coach Hess and the way he's handled the COVID workouts from day one when we all went remote, to Luke Ross, who has handled he and the medical staff, Dr. Sioka, have handled all of the guidelines that the kids have to go through. I wasn't sure any of this was going to work, and our eating's working. The food's been good. We social distance at lunch, and then following up with Kelsey, our nutritionist. She's done a tremendous job. So we only had 1 player get cramps in the opening ball game, only 1, and it was hot against Syracuse. And now we've had a couple of weeks to continue to run. And what we do, Aaron, we sprint everywhere we go in practice. So we don't run the old traditional sprints after practice that we all had to run unless we feel like someone has not gotten their running during practice. And your specialists, the receivers, the running backs, the defensive backs, they run the entire practice. So they're always in shape. It's the big guys that you worry about. So we've had a couple of those run extra, but we feel like that by and large that we're in good shape. And it's supposed to be 67 degrees. We check the temperature here and wherever we're playing every day of the game. So we want to know exactly what the temperatures are here so we can prepare our guys for what we're going to see. And it sounds like it's going to be a beautiful Saturday in Boston.
Just to follow up on that, do you look at, I mean, you're talking about you play the way you practice and you run hard and so forth. Is there a difference between practice conditioning and game conditioning? And if there is, can you make that up even though you haven't played this game since September 12th?
Aaron, in my 5 years in TV, the thing I thought I recognized the most that I didn't realize at Texas, you think you do, but I realized a lot of teams don't play hard, and they get beat. And when we say, well, they were flat, that means they weren't ready to play. Well, they had a lot of turnovers. Well, they had a lot of mistakes. That means you're probably not ready to play. Because when you're focused and you're excited about playing, you usually take care of, you do the things you've been taught to do. So what we've tried really, really hard to emphasize more than anything else with our football team is you've got to give us 100% every time you go to a meeting and every time you walk on the field. And we grade loafs. We look at every video, who loafed, who stopped before that whistle blew. Obviously, you can't see the whistle blow on video, so we have a young lady out there that holds up a flag that means the whistle's blown, and they better run till they see that flag go up. And that gets you in condition if you run every play, and then we make them run on and off the field after it's time to switch out. So we feel like that our game speed, we're fulfilling that with the way we practice. And that's something we demand every day.
Thanks, Mac.
Thank you.
Let's go to CL Brown. CL, go ahead.
Hi, Max. CL Brown with the Raleigh News and Observer. You've kind of alluded to it before in terms of the NCAA, how they're handling eligibility this year. How does that fold into, like, how do you go about recruiting knowing that some guys that you would have planned, that you planned initially would be gone could actually end up coming back for next season? So I was just curious how this fall, how that plays out for your recruiting.
Yeah, CL, it's very interesting. We're all sitting here looking at roster management now, and what does that mean? Because we've never had COVID before, so that changes a lot of things that you're doing. We've never had the NCAA come out and say, this year doesn't count. So all your guys are eligible 4 years after this, but this just doesn't count. So then do your seniors go try to get a job when the job market's tough? Do your seniors go to the NFL if they're not really sure what round they're going to be drafted, but do they roll the dice? Because you have to determine by the second week in January. If you're a graduate, can you get in graduate school if you want to come back? Or do you have to be a grad transfer and go somewhere else? If you're not playing a lot, do you want to transfer? And all those things now are issues that weren't issues before. We've got 120 lockers in our locker room. Next year, we could have up to 97 guys on scholarship. And then what do? We don't have places to put them. So there are a lot of different things that we're having to look at we've never had to look at before. The most concerning thing to me, it won't affect this year's recruiting class. We had a lot of parents say, are you still going to be able to recruit my son even though you have some seniors that may come back? And the answer is yes. You still get your initials this year that you had. The big question will be, and not just your seniors will be gone next year if they come back. The big question will be all of the other guys that did not count this year in their eligibility means that we could have like 52 freshmen on our team next year. And then that really affects the amount of numbers that you may have available for the 2022 class. That's where it's really going to affect recruiting in my standpoint. Billy High and I have talked hours about the effects of recruiting in 2 years. Not this year, but 2 years. Because if everybody stays and the seniors that may not have an easy time finding a job right now, if they're not in the NFL, if they want to stay, then if you go back to 85 in 2 years, that 22 class could be a really small class.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you. But it's a concern that all of us are having to look at.
All right, let's go over to David Hale. David, go ahead.
Hey, Mac, I noticed that your team that you were supposed to play a couple weeks ago, Charlotte, Will Healy, did some interesting sort of team building competitive activities when they couldn't play their game on Saturday. I know Dana Holgerson's talked a little bit about having to get creative a bit to keep guys dialed in during a long stretch. Is there anything different that you've done over these last couple of weeks that you wouldn't normally be doing at this point of the season, just to kind of keep guys locked in or build team morale a little bit when you are going, effectively 3 weeks without playing a game?
Yeah, David, one thing we've done is we lift our guys on Friday morning, but then they're off Friday afternoon and all day Saturday, so they can just get away from it and clear their minds and rest their bodies. So we did not want to do anything on Saturday. Some people talked about scrimmaging. I was concerned that if we had a scrimmage on Saturday and they were distracted and disappointed that they didn't play, that we might get somebody hurt because they're just not as into it. What we did is we scrimmaged all of our younger ones on Thursday afternoon, and I know like Coach Longo let Sam call the plays. So it was a lot of fun. I'm not sure I've seen this bunch have this much fun since the bowl game. They were shouting for each other, and it got competitive, and offense and defense were cheering from the sidelines, and they had an absolute blast. So that's probably the most creative thing we've done that was a lot of fun for the players. Because a lot of guys that don't get to play very much and will not play a lot probably in their careers here got to play and had some fun, and the players love that. They really enjoy watching guys have fun that work hard on scout teams and young players that haven't had their opportunities yet.
All right, next up is Greg Barnes. Greg, go ahead.
Mike, I wanted to ask you about the Western Carolina game that you mentioned. Did you have a preference whether that game was played the week of the bye week in November before the Notre Dame game, or did you like the December 11th?
Greg, we ended up, because our university moved everything back a week, we have finals the week before the Notre Dame game, so we could not have played that weekend. I mean, we looked at every possible scenario, and it would have been very, very unfair and not smart for us to be taking finals the day of the game and the day before and maybe the day after. So that was something that we initially wanted to do. When Rick Steinbacher started looking at the changes in our academic schedule, it was just impossible. And then the ACC did want us to play a +1. We asked, and they said that they would like for us to do that. So we felt like that this was the only other possible way to schedule it. And Western Carolina did work with us. So if we're unfortunate enough to have to postpone a game and move it back, another one, then it would take the place of the Western Carolina game.
There are already a couple of other ACC games scheduled for that second weekend of December. Has the ACC given you any indication that the championship game will be played on December 19th?
They have not. In fact, I'm not even sure that decision has been decided. We've been trying to get to Saturday. So we're wanting to play the ones this Saturday, so I haven't been able to worry about down the road yet. And I was just told a few minutes ago about the Western Carolina game. I mean, that popped up within the last 30 minutes.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, Ralph Russo, you're up next.
Hey, Mac. I was wondering, what are you doing with players, or what kind of plan do you have for players who have ended up in quarantine to keep them active, or maybe even a kid who tested positive is in isolation but is asymptomatic? So, you have a player who might be inactive per se for 14 days or 10 plus days. Is there anything you can do with those players beyond maybe encouraging them to do a bunch of sit-ups and push-ups to keep them active while they are in either quarantine or isolation?
Ralph, we really can't. We obviously can communicate with them through Zoom, and they get to continue to go to class. But they have to have medical clearance before they can work out with us. And it's a very difficult deal, especially for someone who is asymptomatic, or even more so, someone who's in contact tracing mode, and they're in isolation. So the quarantine is one thing, the isolation's another, but we can't be around them in either case, and we have to take them their food and put it outside the door, and parents can't see them, and it's a very difficult thing. Even this weekend, I looked up last night, I think Boston may be an 11-hour car trip, if you drive, trip. And if we have a player or a coach or a staff member get a positive while we're in Boston, they can't fly. So they've got to get in a car with somebody who's already been positive, and they have to drive them home. So there are a lot of different things that we're dealing with right now.
If you don't mind, if I can get a little follow-up there, have your strength and conditioning guys maybe come up with some kind of like in-room program for some of these kids so they can at least say, okay, hey, here's some bands, and just do the best you can?
Yes, Ralph, we did that this spring because a lot of our guys didn't have access to a weight room because all their high schools were closed down when they went home, and most of them couldn't afford to go to a workout area, and most of those were closed for a lot of the spring anyway. So Brian Hess did an amazing job this spring of having kids just be very creative with their workouts. We had some that filled their backpacks with water bottles and ran and did sit-ups and push-ups, and it was just amazing to see how much these kids wanted to play. And that's why I'm happy we're playing, because they wanted to play, and they worked really hard to prepare to play. And even if we don't play well, I think it's healthy for us right now to be playing.
All right, let's go to Chapel Fowler. Chapel, go ahead.
Hey, Mac, Chapel Fowler with the News and Observer. In the recent young guys scrimmages that you mentioned, who are some specific players who have stood out to you and the staff?
I've got a lot on my mind, and that's not one of them. So it would be hard for me to go back in such short term here and stay. Most of them were freshmen or walk-ons. And it was fun to see them, but again, we graded that one on Thursday afternoon, and I've been thinking about Boston College ever since. So that'd be hard for me to come out and see. I do remember John Copenhaver catching 2 passes. So I do remember that. So but I can't go back and individualize those because I'd miss somebody. Sorry.
No worries. Thank you.
All right, Lucas, I believe it's Tomei. Apologize, I don't know your last name. Lucas, go ahead.
Yeah, hey Mac, Lucas Tomei with the Daily Tar Heel. As you mentioned earlier, this is going to be the team's first road trip in this season of uncertainty. I was just wondering what the guys' feelings towards that were and how the team is handling the road trip different than how you guys normally would in a regular season.
Lucas, I probably can't answer that honestly yet because it's so early in the week. And talking to our medical experts, one of the differences will be that they will ask us to wear an N95 mask. So we'll have social distancing on the bus and on the plane, but normally the guys can eat snacks and drink and do things they want to going up and back, and that will not be the case now. So what we will do is try to work out here, then we'll hop on the plane and get up there in time to go eat dinner at the hotel, and we'll have our meetings there and put them to bed. And it's been so unique. I think we're fortunate to have had an opportunity to stay in a hotel here after the night before the opening game, because a hotel's a hotel, and your roommates are different now. You're having to look at what's safe. You're not looking at should Jason and Sam room together because they get to talk game plan and all that. You're totally looking at who's a roommate with a guy right now, and who is got a less chance to be sick if he's with this one, and the coaches are sitting far apart on the bus and the plane because we don't want a coach to get sick. So Lucas, you're right in that it's going to be very different, but at least we've had a little taste of it by going to the hotel here and coming back in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last one for Coach Brown, Luke Buxton. Luke, go ahead.
Hey, Coach. Luke Buxton with Inside Carolina. I'm curious, with the announcement that Keenan can have 7% capacity, do you have any indication of who will be allowed or who will have preference? Do the players get to have any vote or say if that will be students or a mixture of fans?
Luke, I only know that I was told that the players can have the normal ticket allotment that they would have had for a normal game. Other than that, it's way beyond me to figure out who goes in. I'm sure Bubba and Kevin and Rick Steinbach are looking at that now. They went from absolutely no fans to 3,500, I think, is our 7%, and that could even change. But Rick and Bubba have worked really, really hard since all this started, understanding they got a plan for a full house. They got a plan for 50%, 25%. So they've looked at a lot of different scenarios and how to keep all of those scenarios safe. So, but they would have to answer that for you. Again, I'm staying in my little lane here and trying to get ready to play Boston College.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.
All right, Coach, that's the last one we got for today. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Y'all have a great week. And I would say we'd see you in Boston, but I guess I'll see you on Zoom. Or I'll see you Wednesday before that. So thank you.
We'll have Phil Longo here momentarily.
Phil Longo.
Good morning.
Hi, Coach.
How are
Thanks
you,
for
sir?
joining us. Doing well, thank you. We'll grab a few questions here for you as soon as our media raises their hand, and we will go from there. First one is Andrew Jones. So Andrew, please go ahead.
Hey, Coach. Hunter Long, tight end for Boston College, has had 2 very productive games so far. What kind of challenge does he present for you guys, and how much will Jaquarius Conley have to deal with the tight end the way that they use him?
So is that your question for Jay Bateman, I would imagine, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said Bateman was on there. I'm sorry. Okay, a question for you would be very simple. What have you seen from Boston College's defense? The first 2 games, they were pretty solid against Duke. And how much of what they're doing is what you saw Jeff Hafley do previously?
So at Duke, they had really one approach because of what Duke does. I think what they saw in Texas State is more similar to what they would see from us. Jake Peeler, their wide receiver coach at Ole Miss, for me, is now the offensive coordinator at Texas State. So there were a lot of similarities between what Texas State did against Boston College last week and some of the things that we do in our offense here. So it was good film for us. And I would also say that the game against Texas State brought out a few more things that BC has in the playbook. So, we saw more dime coverage, more to Tampa, and didn't necessarily see that against Duke. So the playbook opened up a little bit. We saw a couple new things from the second game. It's a very disciplined, it's a well-coached scheme. You're watching Ohio State play in the same type of system. And so that's really the defense that we're facing on Saturday against Boston College.
All right, I wrote down Jay's name and not yours. That's why I asked that first question. Thanks a lot, Coach.
Yes, sir.
All right, Chapel Fowler, you're up next.
Hey, Coach. In your career, when you have 3 really established receivers, like you do now with Danny, Daz, and Bo, how do you try to work in younger guys and backups to keep them fresh?
Well, that's an interesting question. There's really a standard in every room, but interestingly enough, in the receiver room, it's probably the most important outside of the O-line to have great depth. And the reason for that is we do throw the football a little bit and we cover a lot of ground. Even when we run the football, there are times where we're running routes. So it's good for us to develop depth because, in my opinion, I think in our opinion, De'Ami Brown playing 60 reps as opposed to playing 85, he's going to be a lot fresher. And in our experience in the past, having a guy like A.J. Brown or D.K. Metcalf or one of those guys at Ole Miss, when their numbers, their total numbers in a game dropped, their production actually went up. And it's because they were fresher and they were better players on each of those downs. And so when we're able to spell Daz Newsome or De'Ami Brown or Bo Corrales with guys like Antoine Green and Josh Downs and Toe Groves and Emery Simmons, all of whom we have great confidence in right now, those guys coming in, they may not be the every down starter, but at 100%, they're probably better than the starter is at 75 or 80%. So it gives us an opportunity to not have to change what we do at all, not call a play because somebody out there is tired. And the depth at wide receiver really is the number one thing outside of the O-line that's going to allow us to maintain staying in our tempo if we want to.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Greg Barnes, go ahead.
Hey, Phil, I know Mac is kind of the main one that deals with hype and expectations for the players, but I'm just kind of curious from your standpoint with the offense. There's a lot of expectation out of those guys that they should be very good this year. Do you have to address that at all in terms of not letting them get too high or too low if they don't play as well as they think?
Well, I make a comment a lot, and I think it gets misconstrued sometimes, but I really would love for our players on offense to play the game with a lot of enthusiasm, not necessarily a lot of emotion. And I know that goes against what everybody thinks, an emotional game. But when you have emotional highs and emotional lows in a game, it affects the way you play. I think there's nothing wrong with playing with tremendous or great enthusiasm. But somewhere along the emotional realm, you can get off track from a focus standpoint. We don't want to do that. So we want to play with great enthusiasm. We also need to play with great focus so that you don't have the highs and the lows in the games. And I think that helps keep us from making the mental mistakes that we're trying to avoid. And it's obviously harder to think fast when you're playing fast. I mean, we're not giving them a lot of time to think. We want to snap the ball in X amount of time, and we want to push the ball up the field and want to spread the defense, and we want to do it quickly. And I think, it lends to the depth that we just talked about at the receiver position. But it also lends to the simplicity on the offense with regards to not forcing our guys to have to overthink on every down. You can't ask them to play fast and ask them to think a lot too. I don't think they don't go hand in hand at all. And so that's kind of our approach, and it's really that's not going to change as the entire season goes on.
All right, and then I'll follow up on a different topic. Before the Syracuse game, we talked about the offensive line, and at that time, I think you said you had probably 6 guys that you really trusted, maybe 7. How has that position group developed over these last couple of weeks without having a game?
Not playing the last couple of weeks is it's when we step on the field at BC, it will be 9 weeks of practice, having only played 1 game. So that's never the favor, right? But what the last 2 weeks has given us is an opportunity. Q has gotten better, and we have great confidence in him up front now. He's 2 weeks better than he was. Jonathan Adorno improves every single day, so we feel better and better about Jonathan. And then Easy is back now and playing, so we're starting to get closer to that 8-man rotation that we want on the offensive line, and it's probably a situation that we're much better at right now than we were going into the Syracuse game.
Thanks, Phil.
Aaron Beard, go ahead.
Hey, Phil, Aaron Beard with the AP. You sort of just touched on this about the 9 weeks in 1 game. I'm curious, how much do you think this time period may affect timing, like in the passing game? And Mac has made such a point of saying, well, you're having to start the season over. Is there any way to take that experience from the game week and build on it? Or is it, like he said, totally new?
So I'll steal an answer from Sam Howell because I agree with what he said. He was asked the same question. I think it helps the timing. I mean, we lost a lot of reps in spring ball, and we didn't even get all of the player-led workouts in the summer. The players didn't get through as many as they normally do in the summer. So what you lose are those timing reps, and that's why I was so impressed with how Mississippi State played against LSU, because they've had so few reps doing what they do in the passing game, much like we do. And I thought a lot of the timing was there a lot more than I kind of expected watching that game, since it's the same passing game. So, but what we've had is we've had 9 weeks to throw all these reps and work on the timing and work on the trigger time and the strike points and the route technique. So I think we're going to benefit on that end of it. I think where you lose out is the physicality against another opponent. Our guys are tired of hitting our guys, and we're also not, we're not in a game-like situation. And as much as you try to imitate a game-like situation in practice, it just isn't the same. So the physicality part of it, which we were happy about in the Syracuse game, but the physicality part of it, after long breaks, typically there's a greater deficit there than there is in the timing, doing some of the skill stuff that we do in the system.
Thank you.
All right, Coach, that's all we got for you today. Thanks for your time.
All right, you'll have a good one.
Bateman will be with us here in a few minutes. All right, guys, defensive coordinator Jay Bateman.
How's everybody doing?
Welcome, Coach. Doing well. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
First question today will come from Dina King. So, Dina, go ahead.
Hey, Coach. My question is regarding, I want to know your thoughts and concerns on Boston College quarterback Phil Jurkovec.
Yeah, I think he's a really good player. He's a big kid. I mean, I think you don't realize how big he is. So, I think it probably in the Duke game, I was watching that game live, so I think early on you see him scramble a couple times, you're like, man, like you see him get tackled, you're like, man, you realize how big a kid he is. So, he's a really highly recruited kid out of high school. I think it was a huge get for them to get him in school and get him eligible. And I think he really makes the whole thing go. A lot of the stuff they do is him, and we're still going to have to do a great job with him. The way he keeps plays alive and scrambles, and they do a good job moving the pocket with him. I think he's a really good player.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, CL Brown, go ahead.
Hi, Coach, I was curious, were you involved a lot on Jaquarius Conley's recruiting?
Yeah, I was very involved.
Okay, I was wondering, did you have to claim him for the defense? Like, did you guys debate whether he was going to be, because I know he played a lot of different positions offensively in high school. Was he just come across as a natural born safety?
I think Jaquarius can do a lot of things. So since I was recruiting him, I kept him on at defense. But yeah, I went to watch him play in the Battle of Jacksonville, Northside versus Jacksonville in like November or October last year. And he made about every tackle on defense. And then on offense, they put him at receiver and threw it to him, and they put him at running back and handed it to him. So I think he can do a lot of things. But his future, I think he could play running back, but I think his future really is as a defensive back.
Yeah. And does he come across as a kid that you have to, do you have to pull his talent out of him, for lack of a better way to describe that? Like from other people I talked to, they're talking about his just kind of humble nature. And even he told us last week that he expected to redshirt this year. He didn't necessarily think he was going to play. So is he somebody you have to kind of reinforce that you have the talent, you can do this?
So he's a pretty quiet kid, but I think he's also very confident. And when we recruited him, I was very clear to him that I think his ability, we thought he would impact us pretty early. I don't know if we thought he'd be as impactful as he is right now, but about the second day we were doing walkthroughs and stuff, Coach Brown grabbed me and said, that one there's a little different, So I think, I think early on we realized that we had to find a way to get him. And so early on it was going to be, hey, look, he was going to be the 6 DB and some of the, extra DB stuff. And then it just, when we put him at nickel, he really just kind of took off. And he's a big kid, so I think when we put him at nickel, it solves some of your problems about the nickel in the run game. There were times this summer he was around 220. He's not quite that heavy right now, but, so I think he's one of those examples of a kid who came in and just worked and kind of forced us to play him a little bit. And I'm excited to see him, the next few weeks for sure.
Thanks, Coach.
Yes, sir.
Greg Barnes, go ahead.
Hey, Jay, I wanted to ask about Jeremiah Gemmel and just how he's developed since last year and kind of what he provides there in the middle alongside of Chaz.
Yeah, I don't know how Greg. I don't know how long we got. First of all, he's a terrific football player. He's really talented. He's fast. He's faster than you think he is. Physical. Every team that I talk to that plays us that we're not playing again and will give me the straight, skinny on kind of what they thought of us. He's one of the first kids they talk about. So, he's obviously a really good player, but I think his leadership, the demands he puts on the other kids around him. I don't have to get on kids in practice. Jeremiah does, and I think there are calls we talk about look, just tell Gemmel to do this, and he runs it for us. So he is the quarterback of the defense in every way, shape, and form, and a really, really important part of our defense.
Thanks, Jay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Andrew Jones, you are up.
Hey, Coach, a lot of the guys rave about Jaquarius's athletic ability and that he stepped on the field, kind of like what you just alluded to, and looked ready to play right away. But how is he handling the responsibility that he now has, where he's got a lot on his shoulders and has only played one game in college?
Yeah, I think that's been the part he's got to work on. But he's worked really hard. And then, you know, I give our other kids in that room a lot of credit, you know, because they've really, you know, spent a lot of time with him. You know, and he spent a lot of time too, you know, learning, you know, what I do in this coverage, what I do in this check. But I mean, I think early on, you know, we could tell that physically he was talented. Then it became, okay, now he's got to earn it. And he went out and did it, you know, and so, you know, it was very obvious to us that, like, once he got it, he was going to be a really important part of the defense.
Jeremiah said last week that previously he was, you know, Jaquarius would look at him kind of, what do I do here? What do I do here? And he said he was starting to tell him what he was going to do before the player in certain situations. Are you seeing that from him? And how good a sign is that, knowing that the kid is starting to exude that kind of confidence?
Yeah, so I think Gimmel's a very demonstrative kid, right? So Gimmel's going to kind of overrule some things sometimes. But the thing that's going on now is, like, he's not having to communicate with JQ, hey, look, you're doing this. Now JQ's communicating to him, and so now Gimmel can focus a little more on the other stuff. And but, you know, the other thing, JQ's got is, you know, he's either playing with Don, you know, who's really smart, or he's playing with Trey, who plays that position also. So he's got guys that are helping him. And the other thing is, I mean, it's not open heart surgery, right? It's you know, you're playing 3 deep or you're playing quarters, right? So, like, I mean, he can figure it out. I mean, if it was that hard, I wouldn't be a very smart D coordinator, right? So simplicity is the key. So, you know, I think part of it is, you know, once he kind of understands how the wording works, then he pretty much understands what he's doing.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Okay, Aaron Beard, go ahead.
Hey, Jay, Aaron Beard with the AP. Max talked a lot about starting the season over, basically, because of this long gap since the opener. What did you think you could get or what did you hope you could get accomplished during this time? And, you know, is there any carryover at all from game one? At least you have a game of experience, even though it was all the way back at September 12th.
Yeah, you know, it's been pretty unique. The thing about the first, you know, the week we were getting ready to go play Charlotte was we were preparing for an opponent. You know, so our kids were having to watch film and learn checks and hey, look, they're going to do this here and some of those things. So that was, I mean, Mac told us that practice was over and he said, hey, we're not playing. So on Thursday. So I think that allowed us to really, you know, get another dry run at an opponent, even though we didn't play them. And so now I think, you know, what we spent a lot of time on last week was, you know, and it was still hard because some, like Virginia Tech hadn't played, and some of the teams that we're going to play the next 4 or 5 weeks had only played once or none at all. So we tried to work on some things that we think are going to show up in the next, you know, 3 or 4 games. But yeah, I mean, you know, we came in and reset it and said, look, go back to training camp rules on everything, and let's go work on our base stuff. And then we got a little more individual time, and I think that part was great.
Thanks, Jay.
Sure.
Okay, Ross Martin, go ahead.
Hey, Jay, Ross Martin, inside Carolina. What challenges has Trey had with the move to safety, or what do you really like about, you know, how he's doing there, moving to safety after playing nickelback in the first game?
Yeah, I mean, we really played Trey at safety, you know, kind of leading up to the Syracuse game, kind of thinking we'd get a little bit different attack out of Syracuse than we did. And then once we kind of got settled in, I just felt, you know, it was JQ's first college game ever. I wanted to try to manage his workload a little bit. And then you know, the main kind of, the second kind of quarter of that game, we had the ball in, you know, they had the ball in some pretty advantageous field position. We kind of wanted to go with our older kids. I think if you ask Trey, I mean, he practiced, like Trey went into that game, I went into that game thinking he was going to play more safety than nickel. So, you know, we've been working, you know, and I think this is a tribute to Coach Brown, and there's a reason he's got a Hall of Fame plaque, right? Like we've been working on this since we got back. Like, hey, look, guys, we could find out on Friday these 5 kids can't play. And so you can't just throw your arms up and say, oh, well, gosh, we don't have any of these guys. Like, you better have some answers. And so, we've got packages involving 1 safety and 3 safeties and, 3 outside backers and no outside backers, because you better have a way to go play and compete and get your best guys on the field. And so we've been cross-training a lot of those DBs. Don Chapman has taken reps at about everything. Trey's taking reps at about everything. So I think if you don't do that, then you're being a little bit naive. And so, I mean, I think it was really, I don't think they blinked really when we had to make the change we did.
And how's Patrice Rene progressing? I mean, I know he didn't play too much against Syracuse, and obviously he's a veteran cornerback for y'all, playing behind Storm Duck and Kyler Michael.
I think Patrice is progressing well. I think, Storm's really kind of taken a lead role in that room. And I think, Patrice and Kyler, I think Obi Igbuna has improved a ton. I think Dede Hollins was a guy that was going to play a lot and then kind of got nicked up before that first game. He's back ready to go. So I think that's a really competitive room. And then we got a young kid who's coming along really fast. So, I think Dre's done a great job with those kids. And honestly, I think all of them can play. I think the hardest part is managing the reps. But right now, Storm and Kyler, we think, are playing at the highest level. Now we're going to go out on Tuesday and find out. But that's kind of where we are right now with that room.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's wrap this up with Chapel Fowler. Chapel, go ahead.
Hey, Coach. Chapel Fowler with the News and Observer. Just wondering, what are your memories of coaching Jeff Hafley at Siena College?
He is a great dude. He was really tough. He was not very fast, like most coaches, right? He was a way better coach and player. Don't tell him he'd probably hear this, but don't tell him I said that. But just a really smart. Kids loved him. Has been a leader, I think, his whole life, and he's gonna. He already is doing a great job. So, I'm looking forward to competing against him. But I love the kid.
Thank you.
All right, Coach Bateman, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Great to be back with you again. It is the Mack Brown Show. My name is Jones Angel. He, of course, is the Hall of Fame head coach of Carolina football. Mack Brown will be here for the next hour talking. More, plus we have an interview with Ray Vohasek coming up as well. It's the Mack Brown Show from Learfield, IMG College.